Good morning. Please join us as we sing together to get started.
Welcome to First Unitarian Portland on this glorious spring day following summer. Welcome to all that are here for the first time or one of the first times, whether you're in our sanctuary or online. Welcome to our longtime members and friends, and welcome to those of you who are visiting for the first time. We are a multi-generational community where all are invited to grow spiritually and to grow in our collective ability to move towards the beloved community. We are delighted today to have a special guest, Reverend Leah Ongiri, who is also a part of our community. She was raised in this church. Reverend Leah is a graduate of Starr King School for the Ministry. She's served our congregations in California, New Jersey, Florida, Wisconsin, and Colorado. And in her current ministry, she consults with congregations and coaches clergy who are seeking to develop and support their community's spiritual care. Leah is an amateur potter and casual poet. I would say professional poet, but that was her language. And she recently moved back to Portland with her 4 children and spouse. Welcome, Leah. We are so glad to have you here. And I have an announcement about 2 upcoming opportunities and invitations. So members, friends, and visitors, you are all invited to participate in the community conversations. The highlights and insights from the first conversations have been so valuable, and we've had about 90 people participate so far. There are 4 more sessions, 2 more online and 2 more in person. The final one will be on Sunday, June 11th at 12:30 p.m. Come and share your hopes for the future of our congregation. You can sign up at tinyurl.com/FUP conversations, or you can just click the link on our website or e-news. Second invitation, you may have heard that our fabulous pianist, Signe Lusk, will retire next month after serving our congregation for more than 40 years. Yeah. Yes. Well, the clapping is definitely going to continue throughout the next month. And next Sunday, June 4th, congregants and friends are invited to attend a light brunch in honor of Signe immediately following the morning service in Buchanan Reception Room. And it isn't quite time to say goodbye, but it is and will continue to be an opportunity to start saying thank you as we are doing so. We invite you to social hour today following the service in Fuller Hall, and we hope that you'll take time to view our art wall with works by 3 of our members, paintings by Lynn Thomas, etchings by Leslie Pohl-Cosbow, and pastel and stick figures of Matt Shiwi. So we have an exciting variety, and they are also the volunteers that put together our art wall every month. Once again, welcome to one and all. It is time for us to greet one another. If you're online, you can use the chat box on Boxcast or on YouTube or the comments in Facebook. And here, let us turn to our neighbors and greet each other. I want to call you back. I love the sounds of joy and greeting. Let us begin our worship by lighting our chalice, and Reverend Ongiri will be lighting that chalice. If you're at home, you are invited to light a candle or a chalice nearby. We are Unitarian Universalists. We light this chalice in faith, in hope, and in love.
After Mona Warner's 3-decade tenure ended about 9 years ago or so, Dustin Hunley joined our music ministry staff team to lead our children's choir program. Soon after I arrived 7 years ago, Dustin enthusiastically engaged with me in a new vision for our music ministry to children, youth, and families. We kept the children's choir, but worked with family ministries to develop more. Dustin began to take a strong leadership and mentorship role with the annual pageant, the annual Why Are You service, and any chapels or services for families that were scheduled. And you'll remember that during the pandemic shutdown, Dustin recorded several pieces and hymns from his home every single week for our family service. And this is on top of singing in our quartet every week. In addition to the children's choir, he led our youth jam band for a number of years and jumped right in when I asked him to start this year's brand new ukulele ensemble. And if that weren't enough, Dustin contracted musicians and arranged parts for all of our big services with rock, jack, rock, jazz, gospel, pop, and even disco bands. Because of reallocations of staffing dollars in this congregation to suit a new vision for holistic ministry, especially in the face of budget concerns, today will be Dustin's final Sunday, leading our music ministry for families in worship here. I cannot imagine what First Unitarian Church would be without Dustin's talents, ideas, and energy. He has been an incredible, generous, and supportive colleague and friend, and our community is better for his service to it. Dustin, thank you.
let us gather this hour with a hunger for inspiration, the certainty of love, and our best impulse to serve one another. May we claim here memory and hope, laughter and silence, gratitude and growth, so that we might discover the mystery and miracle of joining one another as beings fully sacred and fully human, ready to share life in a shared world. As the song asks, imagine. Come, let us worship. And now let us sing. Let us join together. We will sing To Mercy, Pity, Peace, and Love. Oh, do we remain standing for? I was really proud of my subtle hand gesture, but it was wrong, so forgive me. However you are, that is the right posture to take. A responsive reading for Memorial Day. This is called A Prayer for the World. For all who die in war, we lift up our hearts. For all who live in suffering in the aftermath of violence, we lift up our hearts. For all who give their lives in smoke and flame, we lift up our hearts. For all who go on in honor of the dead, we lift up our hearts. For all who have served, we lift up our hearts. For our country and our world, we lift up our hearts. For a planet that will find peace, we lift up our hearts. For the young and the innocent, we lift up our hearts. For the weary and war-torn, we lift up our hearts. For those who would pray, we lift up our hearts. For those too angry to cry, we lift up our hearts. For all of us, for the many names of God, we lift up our hearts. We lift up our hearts. Shanti, shalom, peace, salam, amen. And now join me in the doxology.
On Tuesday, May 16th, residents of the May Apartments at Southwest 14th Street fled a burning building. More than 100 people lost their homes as a result of that fire. On this Sunday, May 28th, and next Sunday, June 4th, we share our plate with the Red Cross of the Northwest Oregon chapter. They arrived on the scene as Portland Fire and Rescue helped carry people and pets to safety while fighting the fire. The Red Cross provided water, emotional support, and helped many residents get temporary shelter, including at Portland State University. We will dedicate our collection to the local home fire financial assistance. And we also want to note that following the new FDA blood donor guidelines, the Red Cross is revising its screening protocols and will no longer discriminate against donors based on sexual orientation. Yes. We are grateful for the local Red Cross emergency response. You can give by using the QR code, which is in front of you in those yellow bookmarks, or on the link if you are on Boxcast, and we will also have a collection plate coming around shortly, as well as through e-news. Thank you for our generosity. Thank you as we try to show up for our neighbors. We make space each week in our service to name the concerns of our community life. We are a caring community, and pastoral support happens through our ministers and through our lay ministers. That care includes holding the prayers of the congregation throughout the week. If you are here in person, you can light a candle of intention in one of our galleries, and we will hold those prayers. And if you are online, you can send an intention to prayer at firstunitarianportland.org. Let us listen to the milestones of our community this week. This one has just come in. We have not yet heard from the family, but we wanted to share with the congregation that longtime member and music maker Mona Warner has died after several years of health challenges at the age of 74. Mona and her late husband, Rick Williamson, sang in our choir for many years, and as we've already heard, Mona was our children's choir director from 1983 to 2012. We hold all the graduates of our religious education program, her fellow choir members, and her closest friends and family in this time of loss. May her legacy of love and the lessons of her life burn brightly in our hearts. And we will share more details as we receive them. We also have a milestone of joy about Carter Smith, who served as our intern minister last year. She will be ordained into the Unitarian Universalist ministry later today at her home congregation in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. Reverend Tom Disrude will be part of that service. Yes, it's a wonderful thing. And another wonderful thing is that Carter has been serving the West Side UU congregation in Seattle since March. And the service will be live streamed, and you can find the link in this week's e-news. The service begins at noon today. So blessings, Carter, as you are ordained. I invite you into a time of reflection, meditation, and prayer. Spirit of life, Spirit of an abundant love, we gather this day to give thanks and to offer praise for the wonder of life and breath and beauty. We gather also to name our sorrows and to testify that those who have died have left traces on our earth that continue to ripple out. We gather in the hopes that together we can make sense of the senseless, including acts of war and conflict that return in every age we have known. We gather in the hopes that we might strengthen our resolve to put people above profits, to invest in peace and not just weapons, to work for the causes of lasting liberation that does not make way for corruption. We hold the Ukraine, Russia, China, Taiwan, Israel, Palestine, Sudan, the United States, and more. Death and fear, love and hope sounds the same in every language. We gather to cultivate in ourselves and our children a recognition of the humanity in one another's eyes, a commitment to build networks of peace, to learn how to resolve conflict with words and through movements that lead us to a beloved community of all peoples, knowing that peace within the heart, peace within the home, peace within the community, town, city, and nation are the path for peace in the world. Amen, and blessed be, and may it be so. And now I invite you into the sacred space of silence to pour forth your own prayers, your own meditations and reflections. Our poem is Wooden Boats by Judy Brown. I have a brother who builds wooden boats, who knows precisely how a board can bend or turn, steamed just exactly soft enough so he, with the help of friends, can shape it into the hull. The knowledge lies as much within his sure hands on the plane as in his head. It lies in love of wood and grain, a rough hand resting on the stain of the finished deck. Is there within us each such artistry forgotten in the cruder tasks the world requires of us? The faster modern work that we have turned our life to do? Could we return to more of craft within our lives and feel the way the grain of the wood runs true by letting our hands linger on the product of our artistry? Could we recall what we have known but have forgotten, the gifts within ourselves, each other too, and thus transform a world as he and friends do, shaping steaming oak boards upon the hulls of wooden boats?
We're taking a risk this morning. The piece we're about to sing uses language that is not quite caught up to our understanding of what is true. There's troubling language that poses dark as bad and light as good. There's the suggestion of gender binaries through the use of brother and sister. And there's some metaphoric ableism too. We didn't receive permission from the composer to change these lyrics, so we are singing them as written. And it is not our intention to harm, though we recognize the potential for harm is here. If you are directly negatively impacted by these words, please, please accept my apology. And please let me know. Your feedback will always guide my thinking around the music in this congregation. In any case, I hope you will experience the power of this music just as we do.
Thank you for having me in your pulpit this morning, and also thank you for having me and my family in your midst on many Sunday mornings. It's really a pleasure to be back in this, the congregation of my upbringing. I begin with a story from when I was in college in Olympia, Washington. One professor began the term by assigning a novel by Portland's own Ursula Le Guin, set in a dystopian future. Everything was grim. Hope was absent. Neoliberal surveillance culture pervaded all, and the female protagonist struggled to survive, let alone declare personhood. I wish this was a little harder to imagine, but I digress. I figured the class was going to be a serious bummer, but it wasn't. The professor split us into conversation groups and asked us to reflect on our ideal society, urging us to get as far away as possible from the world imagined by Le Guin. What would life be like in our personal utopian land of bliss? What would characterize our culture? Someone started us out with free and unrestricted public transportation, locally and also globally. Can you imagine that? Where would you go first? Someone else had recently interned with a collective that built housing using environmentally sustainable materials like cob. That's a mixture of clay, sand, straw, water, and earth. It's similar to adobe. He shared a long, convoluted plan. There were drawings about how everyone would create their own one-room living spaces that would adjoin larger communal compounds, and he described it as similar to beehive community. He was really cute, and I was rather naive and just blown away by the innovative sophistication of his vision. The most haunting comment came from a smart, thoughtful young woman. After she was invited to share by someone who noticed she hadn't offered any suggestions, she said, "In my version of a perfect world, anyone who abused or mistreated anyone, especially children, would be severely punished." She was quiet for the rest of the assignment. I agree with her position, absolutely. Any ideal or any barely decent society must structure accountability when harm is committed, especially against vulnerable people like children. And in my dreamland of total harmony, people would not be abusive in the first place. Have our world's faults and failures rendered our imagination so tentative that we struggle even to fantasize that our children might be safe? Meeting this intelligent person who lacked the capacity to dream big, in this particular direction at least, helped me understand that imagination is complicated. Indulging it can be a courageous act, one worth cultivating. Developing a scope of imagination can set you free, even in practical ways. If you can imagine, you always have a campfire activity and can pass the time telling silly or scary stories, or slightly spooky ones. That's what we do in my family to avoid nightmares, one of imagination's unfortunate aspects. You can depend on imagination, just like we might depend on the wooden boat from our reading, carefully made by the poet Judy Brown's brother. Boats and imagination are both methods of transportation. Strong enough to serve as the structure of a myriad of enterprises with much movement and many traveling parts. They can transport you and even save you. In Unitarian Universalism, one of the ways we have access to imagination is through humanism, which often gets pigeonholed as an overly rational worldview, literal and rigid, confining. Sure, humanism can be like that, but that is a secular fundamentalist expression of it. By fundamentalist, I mean that it's an absolutely certain viewpoint, unable to allow for the mystery of the world, or the possibility that another truth might be valid in another context or for another person. There's little imagination in that. By contrast, religious humanism is an expansive form of spiritual expression because it says yes to so much. It asks us to accept and even explore that our physical and spiritual lives are the result of vast and diverse influences, including science, history, human thought, and natural beauty. It even holds a place for those mysteries that have not yet become known to us, that might never be fully grasped. All these perspectives, philosophical, biological, environmental, are resources we can use to fashion lives of worth and dignity. For religious humanists, who have historically overlapped heavily with Unitarians and later with Unitarian Universalists, imagination is a primary component in alleviating suffering. When times are difficult, that's when it's most important. This is an under-examined theological idea in Unitarian Universalist tradition, that suffering can be addressed by imagination. The Reverend Louis McGee called this creative imagination. Born into an AME, or African Methodist Episcopal family in Pennsylvania in 1893, by 1927, Louis McGee had connected with the burgeoning humanist movement and its many illustrious Unitarians. These included signers of the first Humanist Manifesto that happened in 1933, which outlined their new humanist principles in a splashy 15-point platform. Here are just a few highlights. Religion consists of those actions, purposes, and experiences which are humanly significant. The distinction between the sacred and the secular can no longer be maintained. Believing that religion must work increasingly for joy in living, religious humanists aim to foster the creative in man. Today, we might broaden that language to people, but the fact that all the signers appeared to be straight, white, cis men, maybe that limited their perspective a little bit. The goal of humanism, it continues, is a free and universal society in which people voluntarily and intelligently cooperate for the common good. Okay, this is my favorite part. Humanists demand a shared life in a shared world. Louis McGee loved this. It inflamed him. He wanted more. But when he eagerly approached a Unitarian minister of his acquaintance about entering the ministry, he was told that he would have to supply his own church, since it was, of course, out of the question for a black man to serve a white congregation, and there were only white Unitarian congregations. Despite this hideous failure of white Unitarian imagination, McGee bided his time, not giving up on Unitarianism, but not able to move forward with it either. Finally, when he was in his mid-50s, he entered Meadville Lombard Theological School in Chicago and began to prepare for the Unitarian ministry. In 1948, he did start his very own Unitarian congregation, a predominantly Black but somewhat multiracial congregation. It was located on Chicago's South Side. It was called the Free Religious Fellowship. Imagination is an idea that was especially developed by McGee. He summarized his position this way: we believe in the creative imagination as a power in promoting the good life. For him and other Black humanists of his time, creative imagination wasn't an abstract, theoretical concept. It was urgently relevant and existed within human capacity, like how poet Judy Brown wrote about boat construction. I have a brother who builds wooden boats, who knows precisely how a board can bend or turn, steamed just exactly soft enough so he, with help of friends, can shape it to the hull. Imagination, asserted McGee, assists us practically to resist suffering. We, flawed yet mighty humans, contain within us the resources to solve individual and social problems. Of all the issues and instances that abounded, McGee and other African American theologians of his era were particularly motivated to address the suffering of racism. They rejected the idea that redemption came from enduring racial discrimination, reasoning that if God performed or allowed cruelty on Black people for their own good, then that would make God a twisted, sadistic slave master, unworthy of worship. Instead, they blamed racism and mean conduct generally on plain old human folly. Instead of participating in what they termed a collective God delusion, they believed that humankind, should take up the task of righting wrongs caused by people's bad behavior and not pass the buck on to some entity who wasn't the true culprit. Only collective human effort, preached McGee, can alleviate oppressive conditions and rebuild a kinder, more just society. Nor is this some kind of lost cause. McGee and Black humanism were clear that with imagination, effort, and wisdom, our world can and will improve. This process itself is important and exciting. McGee wrote that inherent in life is a continuing search for truth. He called existence an adventurous quest. Since we must always respond to suffering, creative imagination is a necessary travel component, just as we might require a boat if our journey involves a waterway. And so imagination can guide us here, now, on Memorial Day weekend, when we remember the sacrifices of those who died in active military service. I believe that McGee and his framework of creative imagination, along with any perspective that values humanity and holds life as sacred, might demand that along with honoring our fallen, we cultivate a vision where no people die on battlefields for any reason. To imagine that, amid patriotic cries to war that often serve to undervalue the actual lives of people on all sides of conflict, is truly an act of creativity. It's a move both generative and bold, like imagination itself. To dream big about peace is not a certain roadmap to ultimate utopia, but it might be a movement towards Judy Brown's poetic question. Could we recall the gifts within ourselves, each other too, and thus transform a world? Maybe the dystopian story I was assigned years ago tells the truth. The world is grim. Hope is not always available. Many people suffer, here, everywhere. It can be tempting to succumb to the idea that all we could ever hope for is to contain damage by keeping life from degenerating further. We might mourn those who die in combat, but not oppose war-making in the future. We might swiftly impose consequences for unacceptable behavior, but not restructure society so that our children's bodies and souls are cherished. Yet, the Reverend Louis McGee reaches across time with an encouraging message. We carry within ourselves a powerful force in promoting the shared life in a shared world that religious humanism claims we deserve and insists we can realize. In the struggle, in this great process, may our creative imagination serve us well. Will you join me in a small prayer? Sweet ancestor, spirit of strife and peace, hope and courage, creativity and imagination. The poet asks, could we return to more of craft within ourselves? Could we recall what we have known but have forgotten? The gifts within ourselves, each other too, and thus transform a world. May we, as members of a flawed and infinite humanity, summon ourselves so that we may invoke good, reject harm, and thus transform a world with our creative imagination. May it be so. Amen. And now in our going, may the light of love bless us and keep us. May it shine down upon us and radiate out from within us. May it be gracious unto us and grant us peace. For this is the day that we are given. Let us rejoice in it and be glad. Go in peace, practice love, imagine. Amen.